badges, and we work with various organisations, and we collect data for those organisations and feed a lot of that data to the national recording schemes. So there's the one that runs for butterfly conservation, so our important one, pointer. Butterfly Conservation's monitoring arm is the UK BMS, UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. We also then record for Bumblebee Conservation Trust and British Dragonfly Society, etc. And we support other organisations. We support YACWAG, which is a lovely acronym for Yatton and Congressbury Wildlife Action Group. We support the Friends of Quantox, so we spread out over as far as that. We spread north as far as Tinsfield, where there's a rewilding project going on at Watercress Farm. And that's a really lovely, important site up there. And we also support smaller projects like the community farm at Chew Valley Lake, next door to the Salt and Malt Chip Shop. I thoroughly recommend. And it's a small organic site, and because of it being a nice organic site, we are recording quite good diversity of species out there. But one of the most important things we really want to say is very much about the success that we've achieved around here, and it's quite phenomenal that in just a very short period of time we've grown from 8 to 174 volunteers, and our attrition rate has been very low, i.e. people have stayed. We've reinstated surveys at a number of the sites, and really pleased to see a lot of these, but we started with just these two. But it's been very, very good to introduce new sites, but most importantly to reinstate. We've done this we've moved from having a word-based reporting scheme into having one that runs on a spreadsheet, and I've got to use the brand name. We're using Excel, but it does actually mean a lot of things. It means we can run these regular reports that Chris was just referring to, and we can produce annual summaries that give everybody information about what's happening. Kathy and Margaret know, and certainly Julie knows, that this data comes through very regularly. It has been coming through weekly. Because of volume of things that's happening, I'm going to cut it down to monthly, I'm afraid. But it does mean that everybody gets a pie chart and a graph that shows where they are, what's happening on those sites. It means that we can also, because we've got such a diversity of different sites, said about West Hay Moor being quite poor in species diversity and Worley Hill being so rich, we've got a range of diversities in there, and it does actually mean that we can show some cross-site comparison. We can, with using Excel, we can hide or display columns and arrange the data in whatever form we like, and it means that we can have just common names written down there, and you can have it down as Peacock, or if you really like, you can display it as Inarchus IO or Aglaze IO, depending which book you read. But it does mean that we can display it in whichever format we like, and we can also sort it into family names, family sequence, which is the preferred way for data going into UK BMS. I will say UK BMS have actually changed things lately, and whilst the initial sequence was family order by scientific name, they've now transferred it to being common name. At switch of a button, it all switches over nicely, which is very welcome. So we've produced highly detailed maps for each transect. Sorry, I shouldn't be walking away from there. but we've produced highly detailed maps for each site that also show the transition points between one section and the next, so that people don't lose where they are. Very important, because it means that people stay on that section and record on that section, and the data doesn't get confused. So we've done that, and that ensures nice reproducibility for the future. Kathy, you mentioned that about the team communication. So we use WhatsApp groups to keep people together, and communication is great. And for anybody beginning, we try to match somebody in the group who's got a bit of experience, and that way experience level grows up. Most important thing is, of course, we're trying to make it much more sociable, so that we as organisations, the organisations like Natural England, Wildlife Trust, if they're asking people to go out and do surveys, the general policy is to try and discourage sole walking. They do that for health and safety reasons, although everything we do is on public access land. Nevertheless, we can all fall over, and just from a health and safety point of view, we try to do that. But the advantage is it's much more sociable. So, and got to say it, I know it's there, but it only works if we've got the commitment and enthusiasm from all of the volunteers. Yeah, thank you very much for what everybody does. Everything that we record, most importantly, the data goes into the national recording schemes. And there are national recording schemes for so many things. You'll know that there's national recording schemes for birds. And that data is really important, but we're focusing very largely on inverts, and whether it's the bumblebees, whether it's the dragonflies, whether it's the butterflies. Here, of course, we're focusing on butterflies. But casual and other records. So these are records that don't exist on the transect route you're following. So those records can go to the county recorders. So there's county recording schemes for Somerset, for Bristol, for VC5 and VC6. And because Lynn's here, I also put one in for Hampshire as well. But all of these data, all of the counties report their data into the Biological Records Centre, which in turn feeds to make the NBN Atlas, the National Biodiversity Network Atlas. Automatically, all of that data that goes in is fed to BRC, and those records drop in automatically, but recovering the records by the sites on which those records were made sometimes incurs a charge, which I'm not going to get into that because BRC need money to run, but they do charge when there's a commercial implication to it. Rome, as an organisation, we duplicate all the records and make sure that they go to the reserves. So we're not stealing the data and keeping it, we're making sure it goes to the appropriate place, the National Recording Scheme, and we make sure that the local organisation that gets to keep a copy of that record. But we've got some young, lovely, enthusiastic reserve wardens here on each of the 4 sites, all of whom want to put together collective data. So they want to pull together the botanical records, they want to pull together the records of the birds, they want to pull together all of this data and produce a data stack. that will then enable them to produce a health of the reserve report.
Just one thing, so just back. Where does iNaturalist that data collection?
Yeah, right. iNaturalist was encouraged, strongly encouraged by the Somerset Wildlife Trust at the outbreak of COVID. All of those records were going from iNaturalist to BRC via SERC, Somerset Environmental Record Centre. We heard last week, sorry everybody, we heard last week all of that data has been dumped. It does not enter in the records. And that's because iNaturalist it has got some identification issues, and therefore the quality of the data is not seen as being sufficiently valid to enter into the records. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with it, but unfortunately, that's what's happening.
But environmental records, those Somerset Environmental Records, they had records from way back.
No, just the iNaturalist.
Just the iNaturalist route.
Oh, right.
And that location.
Yeah, which is very good, and it is good, and it will only get better as more people use it and more people verify the images that are going on there. Peter.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with iNaturalist is it doesn't have the automatic system that I recall has of having a highly experienced verifier.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, iNaturalist's objective was, in a sense, more how many people can we get involved in recording, rather than how can we produce the highest quality, reliable data.
Yeah.
And the problem, I would guess, here is that you have a button to press, we accept everything, including all its hassles, or we try and get iNaturalist to sort out a recording system. And I suspect there's an element of checking on it, but it's an intelligent, thingamajiggle system, which will stop you recording, tigers in down the road here.
Yeah.
But it has all sorts of difficulties if what you want is reliable records.
Yes, there are problems, and
Yeah.
as far as I don't really want to. That's right. Yeah.
There is that function.
And in my view, we shouldn't dump the data, we should filter it. But I do know that when I went to identify a meadow grasshopper, using the pronotum, using the piece on the back of the neck as an identification source, which is the optimal way, it identified it as a coconut.
Yeah,
But it would have recognised the whole animal. But when you give it a part of an animal, the key identification feature, it identified it as a coconut. We've also had dolphins recorded, so it's and that was a fungus.
it's also quite hard to get photos of like a dragonfly or a butterfly.
Yeah.
Technically, I think
Yeah. So there are issues, but it's but I understand. Obviously, iRecord has got greater verification levels. So sorry, but we're feeling a bit disappointed on that because an awful lot of people who got involved without any previous experience, I feel that they've been a bit let down. So, yeah, but I understand why. And filters might have been a better way rather than rather than abandonment of the data. So butterflies, why are we recording them? And we all know that they're great bioindicators, but they do demonstrate population fluctuations. We'll see later on. They are popular for this because I think we'll all agree they are relatively easy to learn. And the most important thing is they are counted across the UK. So you do get very important data quality coming from this. So many people putting data in. The data is accurate with a couple of smidges because they are relatively easy to identify. So as pollinators, we all know that they're very important, and I'm not going to say that this is an accurate priority list because we don't really want to see butterflies down there. But this is according to the NHM. This was their list of most important pollinators. Look, take that data for what it's worth, because it's like all national data. It's a collation of things and doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening locally or in any one pocket. Natural History Museum. So good, reliable source, but that's what they're listing at the moment as the order of value. You shuffle them around as you wish, because what it boils down to is, bumblebees are the most important pollinators. Hoverflies are arguably there, but in a percentage point. But butterflies are certainly there, and we've got 57 UK species. Looking to Peter for a nod on that.
Many people would say 59, but I'm not sure that as you take it, and in 3 or 4 years' time, it'll be 60. And the small white gets in.
Yes, and it would also give us a chance to put in a Heinz beans tin or something there on there for 57 varieties. It's what is important. They're mostly generalist as far as nectaring is concerned, but it's the adults that feed on anything, almost anything. But the larval stages are far more specific, and this is where these species, plants that are coming up here, are those that are very specific for that. So for any population to succeed, you need a combination of some form of nectaring, but most importantly, the larval plants that can be very specific, sometimes a single species. And that can be quite critical. West Hay Moor, for example, used to have a lot of garlic mustard, and due to some of the maintenance on the site, the garlic mustard has been cropped, and we saw an immediate plummet in the numbers of orange tip being recorded on that site, to the point where I think we recorded 2 or 3. I don't know whether you can remember, Margaret. It was very low. Section 5 on the Viridor section used to be the key spot for those, and that's almost disappeared simply by hacking that down. Go away 50 yards and you'll find them. But this is the thing about transects. You've got to record that same route. The purpose of recording is to build that data stack of bioindicator species. And they are regular counts that monitor change. Surveys where you go out to a site and find out what is there is a different matter to monitoring. But it's a mixture of both that works. And butterfly conservation are really good in that they have a mixture of these types of schemes, as we'll mention now. So transect counts, the ones that we're mostly involved with, are much more about monitoring. There's a system broadly referred to as random squares. And then there's the big butterfly count. Now, random squares, Peter, help me please, it's properly called the WCBS, isn't it?
White countryside butterfly scheme, I suppose. Yeah, WCBS, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the local one, that's Andy Danford.
Yes.
Looks after the allocation, but it's random and therefore fits into the country as a whole and provides information on how whichever butterflies are recorded are doing, but across the whole country. And it's not biased by the fact that people choose to do transects in some way that they actually like.
That's really important, because if the random square happens to fall into an area of more or less total concretion, then your butterfly species will simply be those that are passing through. But if there happens then to be the concrete starts to be breaking up and you're getting some thistles or buddleia coming through, then the population suddenly increases. So random square is really important. The big butterfly count, the loosely called the garden count, that's also really important. An important thing to look at here is that the transect counts are a long period from April through to September. WCBS, random squares, July and August only. And same thing applies to the big butterfly count. And there's several species that you won't see at all as a result of that. So you do get different results that come through from that. And the one that we're focusing on for most of the data that we extract here is the transect counts. And just to give you an impression of what the difference can be, this is not parallel data. So this is the whole of the year for 2023, and the other one was a collective data from 2014 to 2022. So the transect counts for this area, for Somerset, recorded meadow brown as being 35%. And look at well done for that. I've spotted it. Correct. So if you combine, look at the garden count. Well done for spotting the seckled wood here. So shows who's paying attention. Right. So if you combine those two, which if you actually ask most people who are not involved with butterflies, what's the most common one? They'll all go cabbage white. And to be fair, combining small white and large white, yeah, that does comprise 31% of the total species. It's interesting when you look at that data. Peacock isn't on the garden one.
Not good last year.
No, but it's
The Red Admiral, I think, in the big butterfly count was 250,000 records.
was it really?
It's out really late as well.
Yeah.
I think it was an average of 2 per garden.
Wow.
Oh, 2 per recording entity.
Wow.
Does the big butterfly count be able to distinguish a red apple from a baby?
Depends on the quality of the data of the people who are counting, and this again is where the transect walkers are not denigrating any of the other methods, but the transect walkers become very experienced at identifying this, and certainly wouldn't mess up a painted lady from a peacock. But it does show a different picture, and it also shows, particularly when it comes to the meadow brown, that a lot of our transect walks go across fields, and meadow brown can be, well, you forget saying meadow brown, you just go MB, MB, MB. You walk around, and as you well know with that, Kathy, going around on some of those sections, Meadow brown. Happens to be marbled white where Julie is. It's so you know, there it is. Different methods can produce different results, but it's important to have all of this data that's coming in. And talking about sort of data and keeping everybody informed, we've got to really respect our volunteers, and this is something that I feel is really important because you put an awful lot in, and we've got to make sure that you get regular reports coming through, monthly updates. Wish it was going to be weekly, but I can't do it. But monthly updates coming through, an annual summary of what's happening and comparing sites. And as we happened to do in January of this year, we did a 10-year review of Canada Farm and Shapwick Heath. Really good to review 10 years of data. Next year, Les, I'd love it if we could do that for your sites, please. You've got 9 years of official data, and you've got 17 years?
I mean, 17 that we've been working with upright conservation, but I've got casual records going way back beyond that.
Yeah. So it's be really good. It'd be really good next year if we can put these long-term reviews on there, because it revealed some fascinating data sets. So what we do to get you your regular reviews, this is the sort of count sheet that everybody uses. So they put the number in here, it appears in there, it appears in there, it appears on there. And does it all without having to add up, thankfully. And then we transfer that data over into a summary sheet that everybody gets to see. And as a result of that, we then, oh, by the way, this goes out to everybody every week, stroke month. So everybody can get to see what's happening. And for each site, we then produce a spreadsheet. Sorry. Don't know what's happening there. Okay. So, things creep in. So the pie charts give you a good picture of what's happening on that particular site, and then you can also get to see the data trends, and those go out throughout the year, so everybody gets to see what's going on. End of a year, we produce, happen to have picked on Green Down in this case, and you can get a review on last year, this year, what last year was like, what this year was like, species that appeared, new species that were identified, and changes in proportions of species. So that's the basic summary that comes out for everybody, so that they've got a single page that gives each site a review on that. And then with all of the sites that are under our little umbrella, we can then produce a graph that shows the overall picture within there. It's so this is not the national records. This is your local records for the sites that we're looking after here.
Some quite big changes in 2023. Would that be environmental or habitat?
Yes.
I guess partly habitat.
At Honeygar Farm, where we've got a weather station, Mike Uren is recording the data every half an hour. He never goes home. And yeah, he's got his collection bucket, his thermometer, and we're now getting toward having 2 years of data. We started in May 2 years ago, so it's really, as we get toward that 2-year step, we can then actually say, look, it was a really, really wet period. I haven't put that on here, but I have got a copy of the review that we can put out to everybody, and I can certainly copy that over to Ali so that she can get a copy of that report. In addition to that, we've got handheld monitoring devices that are calibrated to the one in West Hay, so that we can take a point measurement for humidity level, for wind speed, wind strength, and so forth. We can't measure solarity and UV index on a portable machine, but we can assume that that's the same. But we will. The handheld one is calibrated to the static one, and does mean that we can then pick out a point in time and then say it was colder, windier at Ham Wall than it was at West Hay. So it's so that's data stack that we're building up. So it does actually, that's really important to have a central weather station. I know the ERC, not the Environmental Records Station, but Environment Agency have got another weather station at Teelham and Tatham, but they won't share their data with us. It's on a piece of SWT land. Absolutely. And that comes back to my point right at the beginning about data sharing. And apparently Wildlife Trust, it's been recorded on their land, but if they want that data, they have to pay for it. So it was cheaper for us to buy a
weather station.
buy 1,800 quid weather station and put it on there. But there we go. That's it would be nice if we could actually take all of the local weather station data and feed that together. That will give us a better picture. So mentioning about I don't expect anybody to read that, but it just shows that we've been able to collect that data and put it together, drop it into Excel, put it together, and it can then give us from 2014 up to last year, and give us that data from which we can then draw a pie chart and a graph or column set. And interesting to see what species turns up on there. There's top species. Green vein white turned up as being number 2 on there, which is great. Can then see that data trend over that period of time. Look at 2014, the one on the left, and see how high that particular count was. And if you look to see that that is actually mostly down to one species, speckled wood, and if you take that data out, you see a reversal of trend. Or a particularly good year for speckled wood. But it does highlight how dangerous it can be to over-interpret the data. And the data that comes out from UK BMS is a much higher quality data set than this. But it is data that is national, and it's much harder to get to this local data. I will say Ian Middleton provided us with a lot of data. Ian Middleton from Butterfly Conservation provided us with a lot of data, but it's data that we collected. So it is possible, I'd say likely it's possible that the data set is variable because maybe our volunteers at the time weren't that experienced. Maybe as the experience grew, the data quality improved.
Which data were now?
What I can't get to from the data sets is how many transect counts were done. So if fewer transects were done, the numbers of butterflies would be down. And Butterfly Conservation, they have a clever interpolation algorithm that will pop data into where it's missing. And I do know that Mike Uren is working with Peter to provide some interpolation algorithms,
Could you give the
missing
average
data
per
sets.
week, the best one, the average per week survey? Survey, that would be,
But if you meet with Mike, physics prof, really good yeah, yeah.
If your missing week is in July, you're going to lose a lot more.
Yeah.
And if your missing week is in April.
And when you work,
So this is why gradually with Mike, we're working through, but we put the interpolations in.
Yeah.
So the total figure for the year is much closer to what it would have been if somebody had done, as a number of people had done all the weeks.
Yeah.
Right? But in a sense, all of them depend upon what day you went and the luck of the draw. And insects do go up and down dramatically.
Yeah.
Anyway, which is why long term, you're really interested in 10 years and more.
yes, and we're interested in, and the more sites that report in, the more accurate the data trends become.
Certainly our sites, like a lot of sites, are weather dependent. And if you get a really bad August, your record is wiped out for that month.
Yeah. I mean, up at Priddy, you get shut off for a couple of the months of the year.
It starts a month earlier, a month later.
That's right. Yeah, and this is where I think it's very interesting to have a spread of sites that we report locally, because you can then see that the data does actually shift. Species records, appearances do shift. John will be talking tomorrow about emergent species of dragonflies and damselflies, and we've debated that quite heavily about what appears when and where, and of course that does vary. That varies according to where we're looking. Data set together, and that's fantastic. So congratulations to Chapwick Heath and Canada Farm for having that, and obviously we'll steadily work toward getting more.
It's very well going for 10 years. I think the economy would be lost in 10 years. And I feel, if you can see a trend over 2 or 3 years and try and help, we can't wait 10 years.
That's right.
We're losing stuff.
That's right. And that's why, that's exactly why the data set needs to come to the local people.
React to it.
Yeah.
The grazing isn't right. If something is, how it's being managed isn't helping.
Yeah.
I think it's quite urgent what's up. I don't like the 10-year, 20-year. There we go.
Yeah, I entirely agree, and this is why it's really important for us to get this data to the sites, and why these young enthusiastic people are building it.
With passion.
But the boots on the ground, if you've got more boots on the ground, then you should be able to see those changes. Not necessarily, you're always showing
I think that's the local people as well. People locally, you notice what's going on. Local people tell us
And
what's missing.
and monitoring a spectrum of species. I mean, I've seen decline, a full decline on certain butterfly species, but that's because their food plant has gone. So, so that's, the botany is just as important.
Yeah, and as I say, orange tip practically disappearing from West Timor. You can blame the person who set up the transect, because if they didn't get that route right in the first place, then that
You
didn't.
set a route and then someone changes the way they mow or trim.
But what we can't do if we want consistent data, once we've set that route, we've got to stick with it, and hence why these maps, these kind of maps, why it's really important to make sure that everybody is following. Absolutely, everybody's following exactly the same. Yeah, funnily enough. Okay, there we go. In order to answer your question, transect route. It's a route that is followed year after year. It's And think of yourself as walking through a plastic polytunnel, and you're counting 2.5 meters either side of you, and 2.5 meters above, looking 5 meters ahead, and don't count anything that comes up behind you. Rhinoceros, that sort of thing coming galloping up. So yes, a transect is a predefined route that you're following through. So think about it as literally walking through a plastic polytunnel, looking 2.5 meters either side, and just keep an eye out, because particularly when you're walking around here, there's some nasty things that drop down from the trees. So it's yeah. It's we do get big uns here. To try and keep things consistent and to try and make sure that we optimise the counts, there are weather conditions defined. And this is where the WhatsApp groups work particularly well, because everybody will look out to see one person usually, will look to see what the optimal weather conditions are, and then choose that day and pop out a WhatsApp message and say, Kathy, do you want to come along today? Whatever.
Can I just ask a question? One of the things that really confuses me is the percentage sunshine.
Yeah.
So if you're surveying in a wood, it's shaded, because there's not trees. So if the sun's shining outside the wood, but it's shady in the wood, does that still count 100% sunshine? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, this is why we measure solarity at on Honeygale Farm, because that's a true measurement.
Yeah. But in terms of the BDS, you have to put the percentage sunshine. I still don't. I
Right.
read it, and I still don't understand why.
I know. So here's the rule we use. Don't look over there, look up there. Point number one, because it can be sunny over there, but it's not sunny where you're standing. Look up, look at roughly at the radius. If there's little pops of cloud in the sky, you might look at it and just sort of say 10% of the area I'm walking in is cloud cover. Sunshine level is 90%.
And that includes if you're in a wood.
It includes if you're in a wood, because the fact that you're in a wood is taken care of. Yes. Yes.
There was advocated.
Yes.
Blue butterflies, no sun, they won't be there.
Yeah.
Some of the browns, it doesn't matter if there's no sun at all, and they'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking in terms of how you report the survey, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Is there a consistent way of ensuring
Yeah.
we all report the same sunshine level in the same way?
Yeah. There isn't a consistent way unless Peter's got a.
Well, no, I have the same question. I'm not looking at, if I am a butterfly, right, and I do the section, I'm really interested in was the sun shining all the time when I was flying about, which isn't necessarily the same as the proportion that's up there. You know, I could have actually walked the section and the sun was shining all the time, and therefore, and I haven't cracked what they really mean.
Yeah.
They're looking at the sky and the clouds is easy to do.
Yeah.
But if I'm a butterfly, especially if I'm on the edge of Mendip, in fact, the cloud sits on the top of Mendip, but the sun comes from over here.
Yeah.
And therefore, I suspect that we're trying to get at was the butterfly flying about in sunshine for the
No shade.
well, quite. But I think, well, the sun would be shining, but if it's a woodland one, it will be the same for all of it. But I think you end up with, it's really to interpret strange readings. Was there no sunshine when you went out? Which could be an account when people are looking back at it.
Oh.
I'm not aware of somebody, using that figure to say what the climate was for what's going on. But it's more to do with if there's an odd figure in a series, you can go and look at it and say, look, there was 5% sunshine, but it was actually quite warm. Presumably the browns will be flying about that time of year. But it does enable some interpretation of things that have happened unusually. But in principle, you want the sunniest, stillest day in the week that you can possibly do, that is you're available.
Yeah. It's and it's everybody asks this question, and what we tend to do at the beginning is to do that, and then at the end we do that, and then we split the difference. But according to UK BMS rules, and the same thing applies to the BDS, to British Dragonfly Society, we should be carrying out all of these measurements for each section.
Yes, exactly. And I record those, but then at the end you input at the front, just to overall visit.
And that's why we do. That's why we tend to do the start and the end, and then split the difference. And it's a great argument.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear that this is an area of confusion. It seems quite an important piece of discriminatory data.
Yeah.
I kind of worked through it in my own head
Yeah.
at the time I was doing the transect and came to the conclusion that essentially you had to take each sector and work out for what proportion of the time walking through that sector you were in the sunshine.
Yeah.
That's what I
Because then your butterflies.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much cloud there is, because it could be around the edges, or it could be dappled, you could have 100% sun and 60% cloud.
Mm.
That's the way I tend to interpret it at the moment.
I don't
That's
think it
right.
matters as it happens.
Okay.
I mean, in the sense that one is easier to set up, but if it was to do it on a scale, was it a sunny day or not?
Yeah.
The figures will be much the same, but I agree. I was looking at it from a butterfly.
Yes.
What I
Most of this is think
I
about
got
it.
sunshine on me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the minutes where the clouds seem to stay over the top there, there can be lots of sunshine, but actually the cloud above you is just sitting there because it's formed as so that. But
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And keep it simple, which is to say,
Yeah.
were you in sunshine?
Yes.
If you're in the middle of the world, you get dappled
Don't
sunshine.
sound- I can try asking that question at
Yeah.
the National Reporters meeting on mid-Saturday, but I tend to prod at small skippers as well, and Essex skippers, but that's
Yeah.
the same problem. But fine, but
Yeah.
I think the answer is, it's not something to particularly worry about, because I don't think anybody is putting together from that data, treating it as, sort of really accurate thing.
Yes.
And you could actually put, was it sunny or not? Almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a time when if the temperature was below, 13, or the sun was below 60%, the data, it wouldn't accept the data. They've changed that now.
Mm.
But there was a time when it needed to, they wanted to encourage you to have looked at the sunny time.
Mm.
But don't worry about it, except that it's just helpful in interpreting individual days' results.
So,
That's all right.
can I ask Peter a question? On the transit, when I started, there's a section of my route that we return on the same route. And I've always suggested that we monitor the right-hand side going and the right-hand side coming back, and doubling the distance rather than be just once. I'm sure that was originally accepted, but it's changed now, hasn't it?
I mean, it feels like it's much the same thing, but you're doing a half of it, and then the other half coming back. But I think the problem, I would actually encourage, doing it all at the same time, because what you don't know is the ones from your left-hand side might move to your right-hand
I
side.
do that all the time.
But yes, but not if you're just doing it
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
Because you can see them doing it.
Yes.
But
But
that particular section, the environment is very different one side to the other side.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but my encouragement, I think, would be to do them both at the same time, so that in a sense you can see what's happening. But the key really is, do you think that if somebody else came and did it, would they get the same result? Would you get the same result if you were to do it both at the same time and separately, you think you get much the same result. It doesn't matter.
But if we're doubling and rather than the standard distance, then we're looking further on one side, not the other side. But,
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to walk down the middle of your 5 metre width,
no.
but you have to have that in mind. And in fact, talking about walking in pairs, we ought to be trying to view it as if we were one person.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
You look on the left side, me look on the right side is slightly. It was just to actually try and interpret it as if you're one person.
and it does tend to help to walk in column rather than side by side, because some species will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's lots of variables in here, but certainly when it comes to if you're sorry, Chris. If it comes to walking when it comes to walking side by side, if you're walking through some of the sections on Canada Farm, the blues come up ahead of you, the browns actually come up slightly behind you. So the person walking in front tends to count the blues, but the person behind sees more of the browns. So it does actually help to walk, as Peter says, not
But it's just having in mind that's
walking.
However many people there are, is to look at it as if you can, as if you were one person.
Yeah.
But the company is really, really important. And that's actually, of course, how people learn and how it becomes much more fun.
We also have find that with our teams, it's probably something I'll come on to in a moment. With our teams, it tends to form a bit of a division of labour. That certainly on Green Down, Liz will come along and she'll say, "I don't want to do any identification, but I'll keep the records." And we have other people who will come along and say, "I'll do the photography." And the photography is very important. But of course, if somebody's concentrating on the photography, they're not concentrating on the counting. So dividing the labour up is actually really, really handy on their network.
Optimal density, on the route section, it's easier for one person.
Honestly, that really, in April and May, one person can do it.
I think I'm looking at the other way around.
You're looking at July.
I'm looking at when there's so many.
Yeah.
2 people to count them, and imagine that they're doing it independently rather than double counting.
Yeah.
Almost impossible.
Yeah, data quality starts to drops when you're basically losing count. So it's don't worry about it, because the point we try and drive home all of the time is the most important thing is you're trying your best to get the count there. The count is one thing, but species diversity is the most important thing of all. It's and if the numbers are slightly wrong, if you miscount some of the common blues as brown argus, there'll be as many counted one way as the other. And you've got to remember some of these things will balance out, and certainly when it comes to large and small white, those things will balance out, and certainly they'll balance out across the nation. You're doing your best. So okay. So and with the species that are there, and everybody gets a PDF copy of this book what I wrote a while back, and that one deals with Canada Farm and Shapwick Heath species. It needs to be modified to take into account that we now cover many more sites. And we'll deal with a couple of bits of that in a little while. But you also get the fold-out sheet with Richard Lewington's wonderful illustrations on them. So that's your key. But what tends to happen with this is there's an awful lot of species that are on here that you're not going to encounter, which is why the local book tends to be a little bit more important. But we do then also provide people with information on how to put all of the data into the count sheet. Count sheets, I'll show you as we're going to be coming up to a discussion point later shortly, and I can then show you what the sheet looks like. But we try to ensure that there's a rota, so that nobody's thinking that they're going to commit for 26 weeks of the year. And an ideal spin for a rota is about 4 to 5 weeks, so that you get to see all the species diversity that happens in that period. So, but you get enthusiastic people who come out and do it every week. So the trusts, the various trusts around here have provide us with plastic boxes to put all of the material in, which we're hoping they'll repeat this year. But you get that, certainly get a copy of the sheet. You definitely get a copy of the map. We've written a transect guide, examples of how to fill out the sheet, and a PDF copy of this local book. I must stress that does actually need updating. That's what a map looks like. And to go back to your question, what this was like, I know Chris was helping with this. A section. The whole thing is called a transect. It's broken down into sections, and the sections are where there's a variation, usually in vegetation. So walking through here is a woodland part. This is also woodland, but it faces out onto some meadows. So it is slightly different. Coming across here, you come across bulls, cattle, young calves, and it becomes much more difficult to count along there, but that's another issue. But it's definitely a very open section. And your gatekeeper count can be quite high in here, but pretty poor down here. The speckled woods won't see any in here, but your meadow brown count will be through the roof. And certainly as you come through these sections, the species change. So each of the sections on that transect have got different bits, different types of vegetation. We try and make sure that there's pictures of each transition point. Count form, you can use whatever you like in the field, little notebook, whatever you like. When you get home, all recorders, all the names of all the recorders, that's really important, certainly when it comes to querying any species that turn up. Put the names in there. We also want to pay credit to everybody who's gone out and done the work. So we put in the week number. Week number 1 always starts on the 1st of April, regardless of the day of the week, and then your successive weeks keep following through. Put the date in, start time, finish time, and that enables us to extract the amount of time that's been spent on doing the transect. That comes back to some data that's important for match funding. Temperature, yeah. Use your phone, use your car thermometer, unless you really want to invest in small monitoring device. Percentage sunshine we've discussed. Wind speed. Use the Beaufort scale. There is a description of the Beaufort scale in this thing that comes out to you. Description of the Beaufort scale. I liked initially to have it in meters per second, but then when I went to enter all the data, I then found that the UK BMS wanted it in Beaufort. Direction. That's always a contentious one, particularly when you go into the woodland areas. Yeah, Chris, you're right. Use the compass on your phone if you've got one on there. But the most important thing is record the numbers of species on each section, and there's free data entry space down here. Hidden in behind here on that black column, or that black space, is all the ways of resorting the data and adding in scientific names, etc. So keep that all hidden because you don't want to confuse anything. So you can record whatever you like out into the field. But if you don't use Excel, then we have an easy to load PDF version, easy to print PDF version, which you can then write on, take a photo, send it on an email. And that was very nice in Buckhouse Gardens when Gilbert White and Maria went out and did that. So, Maria Merian, by the way, was a very important 18th century identifier of butterfly species, and she recorded all of the metamorphic stages, the parasites on them, or their larval and nectaring food plants. She was wonderful, beautiful, beautiful book she produced. Anyway, she wasn't there doing this. But you can just do that on that kind of form, take a photo and send it off, and then we enter the data for you. No, no, but the form will open up in any of the online bit where it says open with, and it will search out for it. We did try lock-in cells for this. We tried locking some of the cells, but we then found that when people opened it on one of the online systems, it just unlocked everything anyway. So can't win. So I mentioned this local butterfly guide, and I promise I will get round to updating it. But what it crucially, each of them actually compares the species lined up side by side with upper and underwing observation tips on there, and crucially the nectaring and larval food plants.
It's quite cruel to put those real close-ups of the face on the I should see that's really
Bad choice with the Essex skipper, isn't it? But I had to put that one up there because, as Peter was just saying, you're going for a discussion on that. There are some variations with some of the species, particularly things like common blue. Back of this, sorry.
Sorry, double brooded, can be different.
Yes. Double brooding. Some of the broods, second broods, are different. In the back of the book, there's bits about the particular plants, but let's worry about that later. Most important thing is really where do we go from here, and that's where we are going to go into a bit of a discussion. And if anybody wants to break out for that, I'm going to just slip onto that next slide because this will be part of the discussion. First priority is to plug sites that have got history, and these are three particular sites where we do need some volunteers to come in and help, please. So it's we'll go into discussion from there, but these two sites are stunning, and as is Mount Fancy. Mount Fancy is a really important site. Again, 31 species diversity. So that's had a long history of recording, as have your two precious sites, and we do need those. And they're not that far from Hampshire, Lynn. That's it.
We're getting old, so we need help.
That's one of the reasons why having teams of people is really important, because we grow people through. A lot of younger people who are also at work sign up for 2 or 3 sites, join 2 or 3 WhatsApp groups, because that way they can see what site is available for walking when they're free. So it's a way of getting people in and growing them up through there.